Well, in continuing our celebration of Black History Month, how about black wrestlers? Interestingly enough, going back in the day, um, most black wrestlers were baby faces, aka good guys, for the simple reason, Southern audiences and stuff like that. But here's the thing. I don't know if anyone would recognize this name. Roscoe Monroe Merrick. Roscoe Monroe Merrick was a wrestler based out of Memphis, Tennessee, in that area. And he was a champion of his black fans because back then, wrestling matches were segregated. The white guys, the white patrons, white fans, sat on the floor and in bleachers. The black fans, up in the balcony. So whenever Roscoe would wrestle, he'd always point to the balcony and, acknowledge the fans. So the story goes that he was driving to a match, and he stopped in a gas station and he was tired, and there was a black dude hitchhiking. So he said, I want to take some rest. Why don't you drive me as far as I got to go and take it from there? So when he pulled up at the arena, the two of them got out, and a lot of eyes were on them, and Roscoe went over and kissed the guy, prompting this woman to call him Sputnik, because at that point the Russians had launched the Sputnik, and that was communism, so they were basically calling a communist. Well, he was christened Sputnik Monroe back then. And this was a guy who basically was the original Stone Cold Steve Austin. He had the attitude. He was detested by white audiences because of his arrogant persona and his friendship with African Americans. And like I said, he would raise his fist in defiance and point at the balcony. And he also liked to hang around Beale Street, which was a black area and frequent black clubs. And he would be arrested for stupid shit. After about a dozen times they stopped, because he would show up in court with a black attorney and get off. Stupid shit like vagrancy and things like that. The civic leaders didn't like it either, because he was a popular figure hanging around with a black crowd. Well, when push came to shove, he was one of the most over guys in the territory, so he used that as a weapon to integrate wrestling matches. Basically what happened is Sputnik refused to work unless his people were allowed to sit wherever they want. And that integrated wrestling matches, and also other racist promoters took a look at this thing and saw the dollar signs, because, let's face it, the color green overrides everything, and then followed suit. So this is the man, pretty much unknown to a lot of us, who integrated professional wrestling as far as the fans go. And he took it a step further. To infuriate the white purists, he formed a tag team, I think it was, had to be in the mid-70s. A young guy named Norvell Austin, who was a young black dude, he formed a tag team with him, which basically infuriated, the racists. So Sputnik's deal was he dyed a white streak in his hair, and he told Norvell Austin he dyed whatever. They dyed their hair, white streak, black streak, whatever. They put streaks in their hair, so they were similar, and like I said, they just, infuriated people, but Sputnik was the biggest draw in the territory. And he also would go down in history as a civil rights activist, because he was the one who petitioned to get people in, and he played to his fans, which were predominantly black. And, going back in the 50s and 60s, they weren't treated right down there. And this man stepped up to the plate. He could have lost a lot doing this, but he actually stepped up to the plate and made them see, that black patrons would spend money and they should be able to sit where they wanted to sit. I believe he died, late 2000 or something like that. He had a lot of stuff wrong with him, but the guy was a pioneer in the business, and unfortunately largely forgotten, so it behooves me to shine some light on a guy who did so much good for the black crowds in Memphis and the South. But then you have to look at the guys, the black wrestlers who were heels, the bad guys. And most of them were special attractions. Ernie the Big Cat Ladd was a former football player, close to 7 feet tall. he could be a babyface or he could be a heel, but they usually brought him in the feud with Andre the Giant because, you know, how many guys could really match Andre for size? You know, Ernie was one, Blackjack Mulligan was another, I think the Spoiler was one too. But Ernie could infuriate the crowd, but Ernie could cut a promo and have the crowd in the palm of his hand. That's how good he was. Another guy who dyed his hair white was Sweet Daddy Siki. I don't really know that much about him, but I know he was also a heel too. And of course, the biggest heel of all was a guy named Larry Shrevey out of Canada, affectionately known as Abdulla the Butcher. And again, Abby was a special attraction. See, the thing with, you couldn't keep Ernie Ladd and Abdulla in the same area for any length of time because it would wear out. They were basically special attractions in the mode of like Andre the Giant, King Curtis, and people like that. So, yes, Abby was the madman from the Sudan. Abby beat me up at a chiller show. Abby's a nice guy. I like Abby. A lot of people have nothing good to say about him, but I only go by personal experiences. I was a stupid kid. He threw me around the room, and we laughed about it later. So, but then, you know, you have other guys, too, that were like mainstays in the business. Bobo Brazil from Benton Harbor, Michigan, one of the greatest baby faces of all times. Pork Chop Cash, Rufus R. Jones, the Freight Train. Ray Candy and Big Bad Leroy Brown. Actually, Ray Candy was a journeyman wrestler who wrestled all over the South and trained New Jack. And usually he worked as a babyface. And one of his frequent opponents was Blackjack Mulligan. So when they were in Florida, they decided to switch it up where basically Ray Candy and Leroy Brown became militants. They changed their name to Elijah Akeem and Kareem Muhammad, wore camo outfits, wore, you know, combat boots, and basically were beating up rednecks. So, of course, that went really over well in Florida, but it, you know, created a whole feud, and they became the Zambui Express. And, of course, we have The Rock's father, Rocky Soulman Johnson, also out of Canada, who was a mainstay on the California circuit and came into the WWF with Tony Atlas, and they were the first black tag team ever crowned in the WWF. So there's a lot of history there, and, of course, you know, going back, you know, to the 50s and the 60s, most black wrestlers were few and far between. You come up today, it's all good. You know, you have Swerve Strickland, you have Keith Lee, you have Jay Lethal, who I hung out with many times at Jersey All Pro. So everything's cycled around, and it's only fair to honor these guys because, you know, these guys going back, you know, like with Sputnik Monroe, Ernie Ladd, Abby, Pork Chop Cash, Rufus R. Jones, they were the forefathers of black wrestlers, and they opened the door for what's going on today. So I probably forgot a few guys. I remember there was a guy down in Florida, Bubba Douglas, used to wrestle, but then spent the later part of his career as a referee. And it was all good. Charlie Cook, another one, a lot of ex-football players. So today we honor the black professional wrestlers in this segment of 42nd Street Pete's Big Dumb Fun Show. And we'll have more about black actors and the black personalities throughout the month. So until then, thanks for subscribing, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the flip side.